of Philately, and I'm doing the easy bit. I'm going to host, if you like, before I hand over to John Davies, who's going to do a talk on the Great Britain 1890 penny post Jubilee. But some introductions first. If you don't know, the Museum of Philately is a unique platform that captures award-winning collectors, collections and rarities, and has the facility to track provenance and pricing information. And what we're trying to do, if you like, is make available through a web browser or an app information about past collectors and collections, current collectors and collections and their rarities, and make that information available to inform and educate the current crop of philatelists, but more importantly, also to leave a legacy, to preserve this information for future generations, to inspire the philatelists of the future. And in a way, what we're going to see today with John's talk, it encapsulates the very bedrock of what the Museum of Philately is all about. And indeed, I think also is the essence of what John is about in the world of philately. And that is in being, John is if you like, he's been a student of philately. He's learned about his topic, but he's also a scholar of philately, because he's going to share that today, giving up his time to talk about it and give us some insights to inform and educate. But what I also wanted to sort of share with you today is that John is a servant of philately. So, I mean, at national level, John is a fellow of the Royal Philatelic Society and serves on their council. He's a past president of the Great Britain Philatelic Society and also on the executive committee of the ABPS. So, you know, that gives you an idea of the caliber of the individual. But what I wanted to sort of highlight is that John is involved in grassroots philately. He still serves his local Banbury Philatelic Society as a secretary. And what I know John for, and I've met him many times up and down England at fairs and shows, is he was past chairman of Stamp Active Network. Now that's a very grand title, but let me tell you, it's quite a humble role, because I've seen John all sorts of venues, lugging boxes and setting up tables and flying the flag for Stamp Active, which is an organisation that promotes stamp collecting to young people in the United Kingdom. And what John's doing there is he's sowing seeds. He's leaving a legacy for the future, and that's kind of what we're hoping to do with the Museum of Philately. Yes, of course, there's all this bright lights of philately, all these great collections and rarities. But at the end of the day, what it's really about is sharing information, educating and inspiring the future. So I hope that's not too much of a big up, John. I'm going to hand over to you. And at the end, there'll be an opportunity for some questions and answers before we close up. But anyway, thank you, John. I shall hand over to you and look forward to watching your talk.
Thank you, Devlin. And I'll start by sharing my screen. Thank you. It's a great honour to be invited to share my enthusiasm for this particular collecting area. It's something I've been involved with for quite a long time, and people obviously start by asking, how on earth did you get involved in all of this? And there I do blame my children, because when they were small, they became interested in stamps, had a stamp collecting outfit for Christmas, were quite keen. I ended up starting a club at a school, and then got involved in some discussions with people like Royal Mail and the British Philatelic Trust, and said, why on earth don't you provide something to help people like me who don't really know much about stamp collecting, but perhaps would like to run a club in a school? And Stamp Active was born, and we went along, the whole family, to Stamp World London 90 to launch Stamp Active. In this dark-haired young slim man in the picture on the right is me. And we went round the show, of course, and one of the things that was in the catalogue were reproductions of the original postal stationery from 1990, and I bought myself one of the original envelopes, and it was from that little start that over the years I've gathered more and more material. The 1890 events were, of course, a celebration after 50 years of the introduction of uniform penny postage and the world's first stamp. And the Victorians regarded that as a huge success. It had been very good for general social contact. It had improved education, literacy, and of course, trade and commerce. And so the post office decided they ought to do something to celebrate it, as did others. And the volumes of mail, of course, had grown hugely in that time, because before 1840, sending a letter was expensive, and of course the postage was usually paid by the receiver. So this item on the left, which is charged 8 and 4p, was the equivalent of the postman knocking on your door and asking you for £80. And so, you know, quite often a knock on the door from the postman was rarely welcomed. But the introduction of uniform penny postage made it a lot cheaper and easier. The Post Office actually formed a committee in 1889 to consider what they might do with the celebrations. And one of the first things that they did is ask De La Rue to produce designs for a commemorative postage stamp. And the sheet on the left, which is on the right rather, which is from the De La Rue book, shows 11 different designs, some of which I now have in my collection. And the one in the middle is marked "the best, I think," by JSP, who was the controller of stamps at the Inland Revenue, but decided in the end that the Post Office wouldn't issue these stamps because it proved to be too expensive, and they had a huge amount of plates for the penny lilac that were unused. So it didn't actually happen. There are obviously some of the rarities of the collection. There were a few bits and pieces that took place quite early on, with the bazaar, with the St. Martin's League. The Hill family had a celebration of their own, and the post office event, their post office conversazione, was a bit of a trial run for events to come later. There were no postal items for that, and the only thing that I found relating to that particular event at the Grosvenor Gallery is a programme of music. The first official thing in 1890 of the post office was a dinner at the Holborn restaurant, attended by 300 officers of the post office. And one of the nice items is the place card for the dinner on the right, which actually used the original ready plates to produce a Jubilee of uniform penny postage memento. And these obviously were only 300 at the dinner. They are quite scarce. Perhaps surprisingly, one of the early events didn't take place in this country. It actually took place in Austria. There was an exhibition in the Museum of Art and Industry, now known as MAC, and actually that kicked off on the 20th of April. And it was the world's first truly international stamp exhibition. There'd been stamp exhibitions before that, but they were usually just national events. This attracted interest from all over the world. They'd had a national exhibition in 1881, and they used one of the attractions was to see stamps being printed and perforated at the exhibition, and they used the original plates for the first Austrian stamp for that, but instead of the value in the bottom panel, they put the date of the exhibition, and these exist for 1881, and they repeated the same thing in 1890. People they produced those on all kinds of papers in all sorts of colors, and indeed a visitor could actually take along their own paper to have the stamps produced. So they exist in all sorts of colors. Here's some examples of the sheets, and every visitor to the exhibition went away with at least one label, either perforated or imperforate. And the one on the sheet on the right was a printing in purple that was only used on the day of the official opening by the Emperor of Austria on the 23rd of April. there was an exhibition of 147 different entries, again, as I said, from all over the world, and people received a certificate and medal. The silver medal there, which is a recent find by me on eBay, is one of 8 that were presented at the exhibition. There was an event in Scotland as well, held as part of a different exhibition. It was only a small part of a very large international exhibition in Edinburgh. Very few postal items exist for that. I'm still looking for the hand stamp for the post office that was there. It's a great rarity. I've seen one recently on Peace, which is illustrated at the bottom, but I haven't actually got one myself yet. And they did consider having special postal stationery for this, but again, that didn't proceed. But the proofs of that do exist. But the first big event was in London. It was organised by the City Corporation of London. It was held for just 3 days, a Friday, Saturday and a Monday, and it was very much a royal event attended by the Prince of Wales and over 20,000 people. And people could see all sorts of things throughout the Guildhall rooms. And importantly for philatelists, it led to the introduction of Britain's first commemorative postal stationery and the first decorative hand stamps, and more of that in a moment. One of the items I particularly like is the invitation card for the opening night. This came in 2 parts. It had a coupon on the left, which you tore off and presented to get entry to the exhibition. And the large part on the right you kept as a souvenir. This is one of the specimens which has not yet had the code number printed onto it. And you'll see that the centerpiece is a penny black, of course, and this was a re-engraved VR penny black with the letters JL Jubilee London, especially for this invitation card that was printed by Blades East and Blades. Again, scarce things. And there are all sorts of displays within the Guildhall, as I've mentioned. Mail coaches brought mail from all over the EC district to be sorted and processed as part of the exhibition. So people could see mail being sorted, stamped and bagged up, and then going back into the mail coaches to be sent to places like Bristol and Oxford. There was a original army tent erected of what a field post office would look like. There were over 80 examples of different telegraphic apparatus, a reproduction of a 1790 post office. You could see the Edison phonograph working, where they produced voice letters and so on, as well as programs of music and lots of displays of postal history and stamps. And the piece in the middle, which features the Mulready envelope, is one of the exhibit labels that were attached to the pieces. The gems of this particular exhibition for the collector are what are known as the Guildhall proofs. These were specially commissioned by the Inland Revenue from Perkins Bacon for exhibit at the Guildhall. Examples exist of die 1, die 2, die 3 of the penny black, the halfpenny, the tuppence and the penny halfpenny. The ones on the left are from my collection, and the ones on the right, the tuppence and the penny halfpenny, are in the royal collection. They're shown courtesy of Her Majesty the Queen, and I've never seen any of those particular 2 offered for sale in the last 30 years. But they're splendid things, as you'd expect. This collection is what's known as open philately. So it comprises not only postal items, but a whole range of ephemera, some of which is illustrated here. So you've got tickets, carriage passes, you've got the original badge worn by the committee to to show that they were a committee member, which is an enamelled penny lilac, and a couple of postal items shown there, particularly like the one on the bottom right, which is one sent to the Prince of Wales. I don't know how these things escape. And it's got the initials HCR in the bottom left. This is the writing of Henry Cecil Raikes, the Postmaster General. So there's a huge variety of material to look out for. Again here, bag labels, one of the pamphlets for the Edison phonograph, programs of music, as I said, and there was an official catalogue, and some of those were bound in red leather for members of the committee and special guests. And some of these items are extremely rare, as you can imagine. But I am still finding new things even after 30 years. I mentioned the telegraph displays. Here's one of the ones that was received at the Guildhall exhibition. And in the middle is an envelope addressed to Constance Hill, who was Rowland Hill's niece. And it's got on the flap inside with W.H. Priest's compliments, and encloses some punched tape, which were used in the Wheatstone and Morse transmitters that were used at the exhibition. And again, these again are both unique pieces, I think. I mentioned the postal stationery. The first of this was produced at the Guildhall and is what's known as the Guildhall letter card. You've got the plate proof there, and De La Rue printed 10,000 of these originally, and they were so popular on the first night that they sold out in less than 3 hours. And they did ask De La Rue to produce some more, and they printed another 1,500 later on, but it was a huge success, despite the fact they were sold at 6pence each, quite a lot of money in those days. And that was not just to pay the postage for the card, but to raise money for the Rowland Hill Benevolent Fund. And many of the events in 1890 were held to raise money for that charity. The other first was a decorative postmark, which is in the shape of an octagonal star. Two of these types exist. One, a rubber hand stamp that was intended to be used on souvenir items. And you could get this put on anything for the price of a penny. People had it on visiting cards and all sorts of things. But of course, it was also applied to stamps. The other one, which is illustrated on the left with which is a metal hand stamp, has a date code in the middle, and this was changed every hour to indicate the hour of posting in the exhibition. Unfortunately, the post officials forgot to order 2 ones, so the number 11 doesn't exist. There were obviously a lot of these hand stamps used in the exhibition, so there are a number of varieties, and if you get excited by dots and no dots, this is an area of collecting for you. Immediately the Guildhall exhibition closed, a lot of the exhibits went to the London Philatelic exhibition at the Portman Rooms, which had been organised by the London Philatelic Society, now known as the Royal. It was again a royal event, attended by the Duke of Edinburgh, who was an enthusiastic collector himself, and the menu on the left-hand side was given to the 30 guests that attended the luncheon on the opening day, obviously showing the penny stamps that were issued between 1840 and 1890. And again, one of the attractions there that was laid on was to see postage stamps being perforated and overprinted. And these were also the first Cinderellas, I think, in the UK. The official post office event took place on just one day, on the 2nd of July, at South Kensington Museum, which is now known as the Victoria and Albert Museum. The invitation for that was far less grand than as at the Guildhall. And again, a whole variety of ephemera exists. You've got there the advertising poster on the left and an entry ticket for an official. And here's an original photograph which from the Science Museum, which actually shows this 1790 post office as had been exhibited at the Guildhall. And then these are two post offices, presumably selling all sorts of things. The card here is addressed to Frederick Hill, who didn't attend the event. And this is a message from presumably a friend of his saying, I'm sorry you missed it, your name was read out first. And again, he was Rowland Hill's sole surviving brother. Again, as at the Guildhall, all sorts of things were operating, even if it was for one day. Again, a royal event attended by both the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, with 4,000 guests, who were both invited guests and post office officials. As at the Guildhall, there was a fully operating sorting office, and as well as what people thought the 1990 post office might look like, with electric light, would you believe? And again, post being delivered and taken away from the exhibition. All sorts of things, that were there, and it included both a poste restante and a pneumatic new tube post, where people could send messages from one part of the building to another and ask a question of post office officials. Again, telegraphic apparatus was shown, and an electrophonoscope, and that was sort of advertised at the time as a wonder of the age, in that you could not only talk to somebody, but you could see them at the same time. And it was only very much later that the chief electrician to the post office priest had to tell the truth and say it was literally done with a series of mirrors. There's nothing electronic about it at all. And again, a huge variety of material. This is the press release on the right of the electrophonoscope, which describes it as one of the wonders of the age. And here's here one of these special pneumatic tube post envelopes that asks how many envelopes were printed, and they've come back and said only 253. I'll speak about that later. And again, special hand stamps here. The post office went wild. Not only did you have the normal large hand stamp, but a small circular one which could go onto telegraph forms and the like, and cachets from the 1790 post office, the 1990 post office, and the tube post. A penny to send a message down the tube, and 3p extra to get a reply. And all of these could be applied by favour on all sorts of things, again raising money for the Rowland Hill Benevolent Fund. The post office hadn't considered producing a souvenir of its own, but after the success of the Guildhall letter card, they very quickly had a committee meeting and decided they ought to do something. They decided not to have another letter card, but to produce an envelope instead. And my collection includes the Delarue archive that takes you through the original postal sketch done by the chairman of the Post Office Committee to the finished, well, through the pencil sketches and the plates and proofs and the finished design. Sorry, just to I should say that these were envelopes were sold throughout the country. They could be, they were again sold at 1 shilling, not a penny. The extra money being raised for the Rowland Hill Benevolent Fund, and not only could they be bought at the exhibition themselves, but they could be pre-ordered and bought anywhere in the country. But they were only on sale for one day, and then the post office broke up the plate. Another version of the envelope appeared on a few days after the exhibition. The original exhibition was held on a Wednesday, but these were sold on the streets of London on the Saturday. They're a clear imitation of the envelope, but not exactly the same. And the post office were not best pleased for two reasons. One, the design, including the royal cipher, had not been approved by them. They knew nothing at all about it. And also it indicated postage 1 penny, when of course postage had not been paid. And the post office solicitors very quickly got hold of Mr. Elliot, who put his name on the front of the envelope, so he was making no secret of who had produced it. And in response, the letter in the post office archives, which is illustrated on the left there, said it only issued it on the Saturday because people were disappointed that they couldn't get the envelope after the first day. This was clearly a lie, because a couple of examples exist which have got a full set of the original envelopes. So he'd obviously arranged to print this well before the event, and it's a subject of mystery still as to how he knew all about the inside track on the design to get it prepared before the envelope, the correct envelope had even been issued. And I sometimes wondered when I found this one on the right that it might, the examples might have been created later of the postmarks, but these have now been authenticated as being right. So Mr. Elliot was a naughty man. Again, another version of the envelope was produced in July, but this was clearly a caricature of the Jubilee envelope in the same way that the cartoonists had caricatured them already. So they did the Jubilee envelope, and these were produced by Harry Furness, who was editor sorry, not editor. He was the cartoonist for Punch. If you look closely at elements of the design, you can see it's quite amusing. You've got the train at the bottom laden with gold going into the mouth of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the hard-working postman on the right, and an image on the correspondence card that was inside the Jubilee envelopes. But instead of Roland Hill, Harry Furness says he didn't give us penny postage. And again, something the post office didn't like very much because they'd not approved it was Spink produced a commemorative medal. This was widely advertised, and they did actually send details of it to all the post office throughout the country, and the post office were not happy because they hadn't approved it. It's available. It was available in all sorts of types: bronze, silver, bronze, white metal, aluminium, and silver. And there's quite an amusing part of this in that the proofs that exist had an error on them. You see the one on the right that has system spelt with an I instead of a Y, but this was corrected before the medals are actually issued. And the finale of the year was again a post office issue of a Christmas card. These were sold at 2 and 6pence each. They were advertised in post office circulars and can be ordered. And in the end, about 28,000 were sold. There were at least 2 printings of them, so there are varieties of this that exist, but very few were overprinted. Here you can see you've got a message from greetings from the officers of the General Post Office, London. This is again one of the relative rarities. and only 100 were printed for use by the Jubilee Committee, and these are exceptionally scarce. And even scarcer are a few that were used by regional post office and overprinted with their own messages, and these are exceptionally scarce. In the same way that, as I say, people try and copy original material in many other ways, so a forgery of the Christmas card appeared in 1979. This was picked up by the post office, and they managed to track down the individual involved, who was arrested and charged with deception and fraud. And he went to trial, a man called Thomas Bray, and he got a 6-month suspended sentence. When the police went to raid his house, they found that he had actually printed 1,000 of these, and about 800 were still unsold in his house. The example that's on the left, if you look at the bottom, you'll see that around the flagstaff are some black marks, and this is in fact the easiest way of distinguishing and the forgery from the original. Again, this is for me one of the particularly attractive, not the forgery, but the Christmas card in general is one of the more attractive items, and it is a nice way of closing off this particular collection. So that's a very quick run through of what of this particular collecting area. If it's whetted your appetite, I have written a book that was published recently by the Royal Philatelic Society, which is available on their website. But of course, you can all view, as Devlin has said, my 8-frame exhibit on the Museum of Philately website. The book covers all of the things I've shown you in the presentation, but the 8-frame exhibit obviously is only a small part of the collection, but it has all of the key items that I've shown you today. So I hope that's been of interest, and thank you all for attending. And I'll pass you back to Devlin.
Right. Thank you very much, John. We're very grateful to you for those insights. And as John just said there, we have got John, his bio, and also his gold medal winning collection on the museum. So do go over to the website, have a look at that, drill down, look in detail. It'd be good now if we can, John, to take some questions and answers. So I don't know if there's any, let's have a look. Have we got any questions? Let's have a look. We've got, it says, right, okay, Gerald has said, fabulous material and talk. What work did the Rowland Hill charity do?
The Rowland Hill Benevolent Fund, which is still operating today actually, and is known as the Rowland Hill Fund, basically looks after postal employees and their families who have fallen on hard times, either through illness or any kind of problem really, and they continue to raise money today for all those good works. I just found it that let's see, that's their badge, that they logo which they have to this day. So they try and look after people who are on hard times, who have been employed by the post office, basically.
Excellent. And I've got a question from Steve. He says, can you tell the difference between the original printing of the letter card and the 1,500 reprints? Again,
a very good question. And the short answer is no. They look. I've got quite a few examples in my collection, and I've tried to study them in great detail. And they were produced from the same plate using the same paper. So there doesn't appear to be any particular difference.
Okay.
Sorry, there is actually a forgery of that exists, which is why I was hesitating, because I say a forgery, a reproduction seemed to come out in 1966 of the letter card at the same time as the GBPS held its own exhibition as part of the Festival of Stamps. So I don't know that it's a forgery, but it is a reproduction, and that is very clearly on different paper stock and different colors. So yes, it's that's why there is a clear difference with that to look out for.
Excellent. Thanks, John. If there's not any more questions, just a couple of things that I didn't mention earlier on. One is that we wanted to thank our sponsors, which is David Feldman SA, International Auctioneers, Geneva, Switzerland. Without them, we wouldn't even be here, let alone at Virtual Stampex. We are here at Virtual Stampex, so if you've got any more questions, please come down to our booth. We're in the exhibits hall, and we'd love to sort of interact with you. Also recommend going to the website, having a closer look at John's collection and his biography. If you go to the website and I use John's phrase, if it's whetted your appetite, all this, then you can sign up to our newsletter. We're going to be doing a monthly newsletter just to update people about new collections, rarities, and collectors that have been added to the system and developments. But if you want more information than that, we are on social media. We've got an Instagram account, a Twitter account, and also we've now got a YouTube channel where me and Marcus have posted some little chats to give you some stories behind some of the rarities and collectors that we're putting into the system. So yeah, John, really appreciate your time, giving up your time and the knowledge and information you've shared with us. And I'm sure that will inspire some people out there to progress their collections and maybe even get into collecting, which is something that we touched on at the beginning. So thanks everybody for attending, really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll talk to you on the booth or perhaps at a later date through the website. Okay, thanks everybody.
And thank you all for attending.